Day two of the Gartner Finance Conference for CFOs and finance executives. And I'm here with Alex Bant, who's been no stranger to this show, but he's the Chief of Research for the finance function at Gartner. And he's been a big friend and proponent with us in all this stuff. And Alex has a lot to do with this whole conference. So yeah. Alex, we're here to talk about the insights from this conference and what were the big ideas. I'm going to let you just start with your kind of overall thematic, what you guys intended, and I'm going to tell you what I saw as well.
Yeah, let me kind of lay the ground and really talk about what CFOs came into this conference with on their mind. So we've got a couple of things, right? The level of uncertainty is unprecedented, right? So we've got the tariffs, the changing government funding, the changing regulation, we've got the tax bill around the corner, and it's really hard to plan and it's really hard to make decisions across the C-suite in such an uncertain environment. So that's kind of the mindset they came in with.
Yeah.
They're also still driving toward this finance transformation. We call it autonomous finance, which is this future of AI, blockchain, quantum computing. We are early days on that journey, but it needs to get done. And so CFOs are really trying to balance this uncertainty and navigating complexity with also driving the transformations forward.
Yeah, and I was telling you that from your opening keynote, I loved your opening keynote, which was the CFO has to begin with their own personal journey and a shift from being a guardian to a catalyst. Right? Tell me more about that.
That's right. So really, unfortunately, what we see is during times of uncertainty, CFOs clamp down, right? They cut the spending, they pull back, they put in more red tape, they try to streamline things, they harmonize things, they try to reduce duplicative things happening across the enterprise. That's our mindset. That is natural and what CFOs need to do. And part of that protection is warranted.
Yes.
However, the good CFOs, the ones that are going to pull forward and really evolve their organization during times like this, act more like a catalyst. Now, the key is a catalyst doesn't do everything differently. They bring the properties that make them successful, but they augment them and they accentuate new capabilities.
Yeah.
So what we talked about, Tom, if you remember from the keynote, it's really around a few things. Change the way you talk about you and your team. Right? Are we people that embrace AI? Are we people that can get things done in the enterprise? Do we make rapid decisions? And then the other elements are all around scaling our processes so that we're not just duplicating our work, but that we're scaling technology.
Yeah.
Another big one that we talked about is making sure that we are delivering not just processes to the enterprise, but products that actually help people navigate the uncertainty and complexity in times like this. And so, we had a bunch of case studies, a bunch of data and that kind of stuff, but at a high level, you're spot on. It's all around this shifting mindset to unlock better decision making.
And as I was watching through a whole bunch of sessions, right, you covered the gamut, but the big themes were continued finance transformation. Despite all the talk of recessions and all that stuff, I don't see that slowing down. I think all these CFOs, and that's what we see in our own group, are continuing that journey because it's so important to the whole enterprise. Upskilling, there must have been, you had probably a dozen really good upskilling programs. And one observation I've seen is that the CFO office has been working on upskilling, but now the controller's on that same journey. And basically the controller's going to be doing what the CFO used to do a couple years ago, while the CFO takes on the broader enterprise view.
That's right. And so this, a lot of the conference is about kind of the shifting role of the CFO in the enterprise, right? They're more involved in data strategy, ERM, cybersecurity, AI, you name it, it's on the list. Well, how do they do that, right? And so a lot of the conference has been pretty practical in terms of, well, you got to manage your calendar differently, you got to manage your relationships differently, and the big one, and you were just hitting on it, is how do you evolve your leadership team so that they are delegation ready, so that you can actually look at your controller and say, drive the transformation. You can look at your FP&A person and say, deliver better analytics and products to the enterprise. I don't need to be at the center of those decisions.
Yep.
I need you to act like a business leader in the way that we're shaping the future of finance from each of the roles that report to the CFO.
Yeah, and one of the things we've seen in some of our research is that right now, the CFO and the lead finance leaders are the quickest way to the CEO suite. They're becoming COOs and CEOs more frequently than ever. That never used to be.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught this data point. It was in some of the presentations, but basically, you look at who the board trusts. The board only trusts the CIO 3% of the time.
Really?
What do you think it is for the CFO?
I'm hoping it's a lot higher.
60.
Whoa.
Right? So that just gives you the magnitude of how much influence the CFO has above the other C-suite leaders.
Yeah.
But here's what's interesting. I was in this roundtable yesterday with 20 public company CFOs. It is the loneliest time for a CFO right now because they can see around the corner. They can see what's happening with the consumer. They can see what's happening with pricing. They can see what's happening with risk and contracts and suppliers. And they have to convince their C-suite around the trade-offs around cost and capital right now. And they have to talk to the board about it in a dynamic way. And they have to take the Q&A from investors in a specific way. And so it's kind of lonely right now to be a CFO. So one of the big things I've seen at this conference is just the energy, because you're spending time with other CFOs right now and you can open up a bit and share a little bit of kind of what you're thinking internally that maybe the rest of the C-suite is not aligned on right now.
Yeah, well, you're hitting, that's exactly what happened with our future finance leadership group that we put together. So we've got about 55 people now, keeps growing, that started up right coming out of COVID when we said, with all this uncertainty, how are we going to reimagine what finance is going to be doing in the future? And they all like signed up. And I thought, well, that might last for a year. And it's now year 5. Every other month we get on a call. It's their agenda. But to your point, they found their tribe. It's other people that they can identify with, share stories, and change, how are you doing things, how are we doing things, cross industries, everything else. It's amazing. But I think you're exactly right. The degree of that loneliness in the lonely at the top notion is that you need a group that you can run things by. And that's what you're seeing here, and that's what we're working on as well.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Absolutely.
And I do like the point that you said, like 60% trust. So that's been what we've always thought the differentiator of the CPA or the CGMA, the Certified Professional Accountant, has that integrity and kind of foundation of trust that adds to that credibility notion. But it's amazing to see the difference between the IT and the CFO office. That's pretty, I'm going to use that one. That's a good one, right? That is really, really good.
And we still have to manage up, right?
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of the job of the CFO is kind of managing those board expectations, even if they trust you.
Correct. There's no question. And then I know the other big theme in here, and I love some of the work that you've got, is the upskilling side. And you guys had tons of stuff, research on what are the key competencies and all of that. So we always have some of that we integrate as well, but we're going to reference some of the work you've done because it reinforces everything we're talking about, and the idea that we now have to start moving into what we like to call, I hate the word soft skills, but we call them success skills, but we call boundary crossing skills that they have to add on their deep technical expertise. And that's where we have to see a bigger investment, I think, in the whole finance function. Yeah,
and one of the things that's been so interesting, we look at what 10,000 CFOs that interact with Gartner on an annual basis, what they're searching for on our Gartner.com platform. The thing that's rising to the top, and it's getting higher and higher every quarter, it's near the top now, job descriptions, right? And in my mind, I'm thinking job descriptions, like we've been hiring people forever. Like, shouldn't we have, pretty robust, you take your FP&A role, you copy it over, add a thing or two, and you're good to go. Not anymore. A lot of CFOs are having not only at their leadership level, but all the way down, just blank slate starting over and reimagining what does this role do and provide to the enterprise, and then working backwards to say, okay, if it's going to work alongside AI, if it's going to work alongside our new cloud ERP, if we've got our BPO providers providing X, what does this person do in the new nature of work for finance? And so that tells me we're actually seeing not just talk about these new skills, but a change.
Big shift. It's funny. So I just interviewed a professor from Brigham Young, David Wood, who just wrote a book on rewiring your mindset for AI. Mm-hmm. He talked about his students. So he's teaching AI at Brigham Young in accounting, but he talked about he had an interview with one of the big 4 AI leaders, and they said, your kids, quote, coming out of school in accounting are going to have to be able to lead a group of PhDs.
Wow. Yeah.
Because in the next couple of years, they're going to be leading bots, right? These AI bots that are going to have PhD or higher level skill set, right? How they think. So think about that. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, I had a CFO of a Fortune 200 company a couple of months tell me, the finance function is moving from decades of model building to the next few decades of model checking.
Yes.
right? And so that's a big mindset shift of collection, input, analysis, output, framing to how do we pressure test? How do we deconstruct? Do we
Right.
trust it? What's the input? So it's a different type of waterfall that we need to go through,
Yeah.
which requires, to your point, just a totally different mindset and outlook from the average finance professional out there.
And skill set, right?
Yeah,
You're
skill
going to
set.
have to change those skills. And it's rewarding because I think that's the future of finance in the sense of the human in the loop. And hopefully that stays for quite a bit longer, although who knows. But I think the point, it reminded me of the old Excel days, because even, beginning of Excel, I'm old enough, I was there in, 1985, and Wall Street Journal said Excel is going to be the end of the accounting profession. And then 5 years later, they looked at the, labor statistics. The only thing that went down was bookkeeping, which you would expect, but accounting grew because there was now more ways for accountants to do analytics, and that's what they migrated to using the power of Excel. But I also remember in those days, the big issue was how were you going to check because we started to rely on that spreadsheet. So then when someone would add a column or change a row, right, and it didn't add or foot and the formula didn't change. Now, of course, now that's getting automated, but that's the same idea with AI now. We're going to have to learn AI well enough to be able to your point, pressure check it and be able to check the stuff as opposed to create the models from the beginning.
That's right. That's right.
That's kind of cool. And obviously AI was on display here all over the place. What else? I mean, you obviously had some killer keynotes, but yeah, what else stuck out for you as you guys thought through this? Anything else that we need to tell our audience about?
I think the tone on the ground from CFOs is that they remain cautious. They also remain optimistic. Right? And so CFOs are not ready to dive back into full kind of steam ahead on the plans they had for the year. I think a lot of CFOs are still looking at cost optimization.
Yeah.
But really underscoring optimization, not cutting. Right? And so it's this time of uncertainty that CFOs are redeploying resources in the enterprise. So one of the biggest sessions we did is around what we call cost differentiation. And it's really how CFOs need to, sit down and have a hard look at their enterprise and determine what are the differentiating factors that are going to be, allow us to win in the quarters and years ahead, and try and pull back on the things that are not differentiating us from a spend perspective and accelerate spend into the areas that are differentiating us in the marketplace.
I love that. I mean, I think and we saw that in our future finance surveys with our group, right? They always had innovation and growth was actually ahead of inflation or cost cutting. Mm-hmm. So even though they've got that eye on, I've got to be conservative where I can, but I love your point about start focusing on the costs that aren't supporting innovation and growth and focus on where you can still move some of those initiatives forward in the innovation and growth line. And that's where that CFO is acting more like a COO and supporting the CEO and COO in a lot bigger way, right? For how do I navigate this crazy time. Now, the other part is we had our own Mark Peterson came, who you guys brought in to talk about all the craziness going on in Washington, tariffs, the tax bill. Remember, I think it was like last night, they were up till 1 a.m. negotiating the tax bill, and we're going to see that come through in the next couple of days, we hope. But the big thing about that was we don't want to just stay focused on the headlines, because the headlines are all over the place. And what Mark said is, whether we like it or not, what Trump is doing is negotiating. Mm-hmm. And so all this stuff is creating chaos, and then they begin to put it all back together. So if you're going to work on the headline of the day, you're going to go crazy.
Right.
So you have to, if you're in an industry that's like right in the bullseye, you have to do some scenario planning. But if not, don't go crazy chasing the headlines. Start to look through some of that stuff and really think about what's happening with your business. Most of our CFOs are still optimistic about the economy. The economy fundamentals seem to be okay right now, knock on wood. I mean, depends on how this all plays out, right? With the tariffs, if we get negotiations and things get better or not, and then we'll end up with a big midterm shift, is what he said also. And then we'll be back to Congress not being able to get anything done.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it all comes down, the talk on the town here at the CFO conference has all been around the consumer, right? And trying to figure out, as we know, it's like hard to get, forward-looking data in this context of, to your point, things changing kind of by the week.
Yeah.
But the more we can learn about the consumer and how those preferences are either elastic or not elastic to the way that inflation is going to hit and demand is going to hit and the tariffs and that kind of thing. That's kind of the crux of it. So a lot of CFO focus on consumer demand, not just sentiment.
Yeah, and looking at the economy fundamentals and not a lot watching the headlines, right?
That's
that
right.
would be the other, I think,
That's right.
highlight that came out of this conference from that standpoint. I think, so I just want to say thank you again. It's been great to be here with you and be part of this. And for all of you guys out there, we'll be continuing to report, have LinkedIn Lives, and Alex will be a regular in what we do. I do have to say one thing. He's got a book out called The Stop Doing List. I have to make a shameless plug for you. I've read it. It's good. And I think that's one of the things we're talking about, right? How can we manage our calendar and our time better? And so I would put a plug in, go to Amazon and look at Stop Doing List by Alexander Bant. And we might even have him on the show again to do more about that piece. And then we'll probably think about having him to our future finance leadership group.
Yeah, that'd be great. And you've got the same spirit of it, right? Not doing lists, same thing. But
Right,
if you're looking for it, it's the same thing.
Not doing lists.
But I appreciate the plug, and I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you guys kind of bringing a lot of this to life. So thank you so much,
Alex.
All right.
As always.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.